On her 31st birthday, Sophie watches the footage from her last vacation with her father, Callum, when she was 11 years old. With the help of those videos, her memory and imagination, she tries to reconstruct the past to understand who her father truly was on the inside, and try to understand the drastic decision he made after that trip. The past begins on a tour bus heading to a resort in Turkey. The guide, Belinda, introduces herself enthusiastically, and father and daughter laugh quietly, mimicking her accent. They share jokes, scenery, and silences like two good friends. But beneath that calm, something else lingers, something barely perceptible. Upon arriving at the hotel, they discover there's only one bed, although Callum has reserved two. There's nothing to do but resign themselves. He kisses her on the forehead. While she sleeps, Callum steps out onto the balcony and barely moves, as if dancing with the silence. He seems to be searching for something, a moment of connection with himself or a break from himself. Someone, perhaps Sophie from the future, watches him frozen in time. The next morning at the pool, Sophie reads a book and Callum reminds her not to get it wet. He then apologizes for the hotel, explaining that a friend had told him he'd stayed there and had a good time. He asks her about her mother. Sophie answers evasively, though she admits things have gotten a bit better. Callum encourages her to make new friends, but she says the other kids are too young. Callum records as he takes her out for ice cream. She jokes that she wants one bigger than her head. Callum replies that that's impossible because she has a huge head. He then asks her to send a greeting to her mom. Sophie does so, a bit rushed. He insists she say that she loves her and misses her. Sophie finally agrees and adds, "And my dad is being amazing." Callum smiles, proud. That night, Callum stays up until 3 a.m. watching the footage. Another day, Sophie calls her mother. Laughing, she tells her that Callum is doing slow-motion ninja moves. Her mother asks to speak with him. Callum takes the phone with a nervous smile. "Are you spying on me?" Meanwhile, Sophie goes to the bathroom, where she overhears a group of girls talking about kisses and boys. One of them suggests she should tie her hair back, that she looks cute like that. Upon noticing her presence, they comment, "So what? She's like 9. Sophie says nothing, but she listens. In the game room, Callum and Sophie have fun playing pool with some other young people. Someone mistakes Callum for Sophie's brother. He laughs and clarifies that he's her father. They enjoy themselves, but there's also something that doesn't quite fit. Later, Callum teaches Sophie how to break free if someone grabs her by the wrists. She gets frustrated, but he insists, seriously, it's important. So you know how to break free and run if someone attacks you. Sophie asks, "What if they attack me without grabbing my wrists?" He doesn't answer. He just looks at her. Later, sitting together, Sophie tells him she thinks it's sweet that they share the same sky, because sometimes at school she sees the sun and thinks that Callum might be seeing it too. And even if they're not together, they are, because they're under the same sky. He listens to her in silence. Then, in the room, Sophie films Callum with the camera while he's getting ready. She introduces him as if he were a celebrity, the wonderful, amazing Callum Aaron Patterson, ready for tonight's show. While eating out at dinner, Sophie asks him about Claire. Callum reminds her that Claire had a boyfriend when they met, and that they got back together. Sophie is disappointed. Then she asks about the cafe he wanted to open. He says not anymore, but that he has a new plan, to work with Keith and move to the outskirts of London, where she would have her own room. Sophie asks if she could paint it yellow. Callum says that it sounds like she's trying to get him in trouble with her mom, but he'll think about it. In a small act of mischief, Callum asks Sophie to throw a piece of bread onto the stage and run away. They do it, laughing. Back in the room, while Sophie is in the warmth of the bedroom, Callum stays in the coldness of the bathroom. That contrast between spaces, between lights and tones, also reflects Callum's emotional state. She's wrapped up, comforted. He is isolated. In the midst of that distance, Sophie asks if it hurt when he broke his wrist. Callum doesn't quite remember. It was his first fracture. Sophie, innocently, says she's never broken anything. Then she changes the subject. "Why do you and Mom say I love you if you're not together anymore?" Callum explains that love doesn't always disappear after separation. Mom is still family. Sophie remembers hearing that her dad was engaged and, not fully understanding, got excited, thinking her parents would get married. "I was like 7 years old," she says. Callum listens in silence from the bathroom while tending to his arm. He asks her about the book he recommended. Sophie says she's having trouble understanding it, but she's enjoying it. He encourages her to keep going. Here we can begin to analyze. First, it's important to remember that what we're seeing is not exactly the past as it happened, but a reconstruction made from the memory, recordings, and imagination of adult Sophie on the day of her 31st birthday, the same age her father was during that trip. And this fact, reaching the same stage of life, is likely what triggers in her the need to look back, to revisit the past in search of fragments and answers that, at 11 years old, she simply couldn't see. At 11, Sophie had an almost perfect image of him. And it's understandable. the home videos and the moments they shared show us a loving, affectionate, and fun father. And all of that was real. But now, from an adult perspective, Sophie is returning to those same scenes with different eyes. She's looking for something more. Details that went unnoticed at the time, but that today could reveal what her dad was really feeling, and everything that he never said. Because, as we can tell, Callum is not as well as he seems. Although his moments with her are genuinely joyful, that doesn't mean he isn't suffering inside. Adult Sophie knows it, senses it, and also imagines it. Every time we see him suffering, he's alone, like in the bathroom scene we just saw, and Sophie wasn't there with him. But this is how she reconstructs him. She's trying to fill in the gaps, to understand what was happening with her father when she wasn't looking. This story, in the end, will hurt, because it's the story of a father who loved, but also fell, and of a daughter who loved him, but didn't know, because she couldn't have known how deep the sea was that pulled him under. And now, having reached the same age, she's looking back to try to understand him. Just a quick pause to say that if you're enjoying this video and haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot and really helps me keep making more videos and content like this. Alright, let's get back to the story. The next day, Sophie doesn't want to dive headfirst into the sea. Callum insists, "You did it last year." He jumps in first and throws her the snorkel mask, but Sophie can't find it. Callum dives in to look for it, without success. She leans on his shoulder. He replies, "It's okay. I'm just a little tired today." The instructor helps Callum with the diving gear, and while doing so, tells him that he used to travel for long stretches, but now he's back home because he's going to be a father. He thought that wouldn't happen until he was 40. Callum congratulates him, though he lowers his gaze and admits to himself, "I never imagined reaching 40. I'm surprised I made it to 30. Later, Sophie records a video for her show and excitedly shares that she had the most amazing experience of her life. Diving, a seahorse wrapped itself around her finger, and the instructor put an octopus on her head. Laughing, she also reveals that her dad went diving without a license, but assures that he'll be fine. While resting at the resort, Sophie sees some adults smoking shisha. Callum tries to explain, but she jumps ahead and recites from memory all the health risks of smoking. He tells her that next time they'll go somewhere else, but she replies that it's not that bad. Sophie asks when was the last time he saw her grandmother. Callum hesitates to answer and changes the subject. They talk about going back to school and Miss Mackle, Sophie's new teacher. Callum remembers her because she was pretty, and Sophie blushes, asking him to stop. He teases her a bit more. In the game room, Sophie meets a boy named Michael. They play video games together. They laugh and connect. Later, in the room, Sophie opens up to Callum. She feels sad, without knowing why. Don't you ever feel like, after an amazing day, you get home and it's like you're sinking? Callum listens from the other side of the door. It hurts him to hear her say that, but he tries to cheer her up, and he suggests they go out to dinner and get to bed early. They visit a carpet shop. Callum tells her that every design has meaning, that the carpets tell stories. Sophie listens, fascinated, and tries to pronounce thanks in Turkish. They laugh, but she insists and gets it right. Later, in the common area, Sophie sees the teenagers who played pool with them. She asks if she can join them. Callum hesitates, but agrees and asks her to come back in an hour. Sophie watches them kissing, sharing drinks, speaking in code she doesn't understand. She's curious and also confused. Callum returns to the shop to buy a carpet. While the vendor goes to the back, he sits alone, his face completely blank, as if emotional exhaustion is finally catching up to him. Back in the room, Sophie films with the camera. "This is our room. This is Dad's tiny bed. This is my giant bed." Then she zooms in on him and jokes, "What is that?" Callum dances around with ridiculous moves, without shame. Sophie announces she's going to interview him. She says she just turned 11, and by her calculation, he must be turning 131. Then she throws the big question. "What did you think you'd be doing now when you were my age?" Callum falls silent. He asks her to turn off the camera. She sighs and says she'll film him with her mental camera, mimicking the sound of the lens. She asks again about his 11th birthday. Callum tells her that no one remembered that year, and that when his mother found out, she was so angry she grabbed him by the ear and made his father take him to the toy store. He picked out a red toy phone. Later, they share a drink while playing chess. They laugh. Despite everything, there are moments like this, soft and peaceful. She asks if he has plans to go back to Scotland. Callum says no. He says everything was left behind, and that sometimes, when you leave the place you grew up, you no longer feel like you belong. Though he clarifies that he never really felt like Edinburgh was his home. Sophie says it feels like home to her. "I'm glad," he replies, and adds, "You never know where you'll end up. You can live wherever you want, be whoever you want. You have time." One theme we can observe throughout Sophie's memories is the contrast between how she and her father viewed the future. Sophie was on the verge of adolescence and looked forward to it with excitement. She was intrigued by the teenagers at the resort, wanted to get closer to them, and watch them with admiration. She was fascinated by the parties, the kisses, and the freedom she perceived in them, but hadn't yet begun to see the challenges, the pressure, and the confusion that growing up also brings. For Callum, on the other hand, there is no future. One of the clearest symptoms of depression. He said so himself. He couldn't see himself reaching 40, not even 30. Adulthood, for him, was a burden. He carried the weight of serious financial struggles and the responsibility of raising a daughter who adored him, but his depression doesn't appear to have started there. There are signs suggesting that he'd been carrying that pain long before. For instance, when he remembered his 11th birthday, Sophie asked him while filming, and he asked her to turn the camera off. He didn't want to talk about it in the middle of their game, and that reaction hinted at an open wound. He later shared that everyone had forgotten his birthday, that when his mother found out, she angrily dragged him to the toy store to pick out a gift. He chose a red toy phone. And given the context, it's hard not to see that as something symbolic, perhaps a desire for connection. That memory suggests a difficult childhood with possibly negligent or emotionally absent parents, and that can become a deep-rooted source of suffering. Later, Callum said he never felt like he belonged, not in his home, nor anywhere else. And when someone grows up feeling that way, life itself can feel like a constant effort to not disappear. At the pool, Callum helps Sophie put on sunscreen and suggests they play water polo. She says she's not a good swimmer. He encourages her, reminding her they only have 2 days left and that it'll be fun. She finally agrees. That night, they attend the hotel show. Callum orders a drink, distracted. He asks her why she's wearing a bikini if they're not going to swim. She doesn't know. There's something melancholic in the air. Sophie asks if he's excited about the next day. He says he is. The host calls Callum and Sophie to the stage to sing karaoke. She had signed them up without telling him. She reminds him that they always do it, since she was 5. But Callum, worn down, refuses. Sophie insists, but he holds firm. Sophie goes up alone. She sings "Losing My Religion" in front of everyone. After she comes down, Callum suggests she take singing lessons, but she replies that he should stop offering to pay for things when he knows he doesn't have the money. Her words hit him hard. He goes to bed early, but she decides to stay out a bit longer. Despite his suffering, Callum was trying. We see him meditating, practicing Tai Chi, and caring for Sophie with a tenderness that isn't forced. He was kind to people. It was clear he was doing everything he could to stay afloat. But there are moments when he simply can't anymore, when it becomes apparent that the mask is starting to slip. In fact, the scene where we saw him trying to retrieve the diving mask in the ocean struck me as deeply symbolic. That mask sinking into the sea may represent the last part of him that could keep pretending. From that moment on, Callum's energy faded. We saw it in the carpet shop, his face completely lost and exhausted. Then came the memory of his childhood, his confession that he never felt like he belonged anywhere. And later, perhaps one of the clearest moments, when he refused to join in on the karaoke, a tradition he'd started with Sophie since she was a little girl. But this time, he couldn't. He couldn't get up on that stage and fake joy. Holding up that image in front of his daughter was already taking a monumental effort, and there was simply nothing left for the rest of the world. Sophie joins a group of teens. One girl lends her an all-inclusive wristband so she can order a soda. Later, on her way back to the room, Michael stops her and invites her to join the group. She agrees, and they end up wandering off toward a hidden pool. There, Michael tells her he likes her. Sophie smiles. She likes him too. They kiss. Meanwhile, Callum goes out for a walk, ends up on the beach, and immerses himself in the dark sea that completely envelops him. A powerful symbol of the contrast between how Sophie and Callum experience the same setting lies in the water. Whether it takes the form of a pool or the sea, water appears again and again throughout the film. And if we pay attention, it tells us a great deal about the characters. Every time we see Sophie in contact with water, she's surrounded by light. Water represents life and possibility. It's in the pool where she watches the teenagers at the resort with fascination, longing to be part of that world that seems so thrilling to her. And it was also there that she shared her first kiss with Michael. But for Callum, water carries a different weight. In his case, it feels dark, heavy, and threatening. In most of the scenes where we see him in water, the atmosphere becomes oppressive, suffocating. When they lost the snorkel masks, Callum dove in to retrieve them, and the way the camera followed him downward, descending with him, felt as if it were telling us that something inside him was sinking too. And now we've just seen one of the most powerful scenes in the film. Callum walked alone into the sea, at night, precisely when his mental health was at its most fragile. There was nothing but the vast blackness of the ocean completely surrounding him. It's an image that needs no explanation. It speaks for itself. Later, exhausted, he falls asleep naked on the bed. When Sophie returns, she knocks on the door, but he doesn't answer. The receptionist opens it for her, and she gently covers him. The next day, a phone call wakes them. There are 20 minutes left before the excursion. On the way, Sophie wishes him a happy birthday. As they get off the bus, Callum starts doing Tai Chi, a Chinese practice that combines gentle movement, breathing, and meditation to improve physical and mental health. Sophie playfully follows along. During the excursion, they talk about Cleopatra. They're at a site where she once stood. Sophie says maybe she didn't die from a snake bite, and maybe it was actually self-inflicted. Then she notices a wound on Callum's shoulder, and he replies that he doesn't know how he got it. He apologizes for having passed out in her bed the night before. Sophie brushes it off, but he insists it matters. Sophie tells him she kissed Michael. Callum asks if he's her age. She says yes. He smiles, then it's fine. Was it on the cheek? She laughs. No, it wasn't just that. Callum laughs too, but reminds her of something serious. She can talk to him about anything. Parties, boys, even drugs. He's lived through all of it, and all he asks is that if she ever does any of it, she tells him. Later, Sophie asks the group to sing For He's a Jolly Good Fellow to celebrate her dad. Everyone joins in, but that night, alone in his room, he breaks down crying, slowly, silently, deeply. At dinner, they share a dessert and take a photo together. Callum asks if she had a good time. Sophie says it was one of the best vacations and that she wishes they had more time. He wishes the same. Afterward, Callum invites her to dance. Sophie says she never dances. He insists he'll dance with or without her, because dancing is what he loves. He then throws himself onto the dance floor, moving awkwardly and joyfully to Queen's Under Pressure. Suddenly, we're somewhere else. Adult Sophie walks through what looks like a dark, suffocating room, with strobe lights flashing, where a crowd dances non-stop. She pushes through the people, looking for her father. She finds him, pale, sweating, and dancing frenetically. She tries to reach him, shouts something we can't hear, but he slips away from her. We return to young Sophie. Callum holds out his hand, and this time, she takes it. In the dark room, adult Sophie finally reaches him. She hugs him tightly. At last, she has him. She wraps her body around his, as if just for a moment, she can keep him there. At the same time, young Sophie hugs him too. She looks at him and smiles. They playfully push each other. As the song plays, This Is Our Last Dance. And then, in the dark room, under the flicker of the light, Callum disappears. The camera rolls again, now at the airport. They say goodbye. Callum asks her to send his regards to her mother. They say, I love you, and they part. Although it's never stated explicitly, everything suggests that Callum decided to end his own life. Knowing how it ended for Callum, it's hard not to think that maybe he planned that vacation as one last trip with Sophie, and that all those recordings, which seemed like simple games between a father and his daughter, were his way of saying goodbye. And that hurts deeply, because you realize that, despite everything he was going through inside, Callum made a conscious effort to leave his daughter with an image of himself in which something still shined. A memory of those days when, at least for her, everything seemed okay, as if he knew that was the only thing he'd be able to leave her. And maybe adult Sophie understood that too. The intention behind it, the profound love he had for her, and the immense effort he made to give her that final memory, even when, inside, he felt broken. Sophie, now an adult, is at home. It's early morning. She gets up. Her feet step onto the rug her father bought during that vacation. Her partner wishes her a happy birthday. A baby cries, and Sophie gets up to tend to them. In the final shot, we see Callum standing in a hallway. He turns off the camera and walks through a door, which leads him directly into the dark rave. The final dance sequence, for me, was devastating. It brought me to tears, and now it's time to analyze it, because I believe it says so much. That dark dance space is an emotional landscape within Sophie's mind, a symbolic place where the memory of her father lives. And it makes perfect sense that it would be a dance, because dancing was what Callum loved most. The strobe light effect also makes sense. Perhaps that's how she remembers him now, appearing in bursts and flashes. Just like memories when they hurt, they don't come back whole, they come back in fragments. But the most important thing about that space is what it reveals about Sophie. There, we see all the feelings that coexist within her. First, we see her yelling at her father, pushing him, fighting with him. She feels anger, helplessness, and pain. Maybe for having been left behind. Maybe for the fact that he carried everything he felt alone, without letting her be there for him. And then, she hugged him. She clung to him like she did when she was a child, but it was the embrace of someone who has grown, who has lived, and who has gone through her own darkness, and can now look at her father with understanding. Because now Sophie is the same age Callum was on that trip, and now she's a mother. She's lived through things. She's probably hit her own rock bottom. And from that newfound empathy, she no longer sees him as the perfect dad she remembered as a child. Now she sees him as a human being, imperfect, broken, but someone who tried. He wasn't okay, but he did what he could. I believe that's why, in the end, the version of Callum that remains, the one who walks into the dark room, isn't just the joyful father, nor only the one who suffered. He's both. He's the Callum from the trip, with the camera in hand, trying to capture the happy moments with his daughter while silently battling his sadness. He is the whole Callum. There was so much pain behind every smile Callum showed his daughter, and we, as viewers, felt it in our chests because we knew something that 11-year-old Sophie couldn't know. Her father was struggling, trying to build a happy childhood for her, even as he was falling apart inside. But that's what childhood is like. We don't see those things. We're too busy being children. And it's not until we grow up and begin to feel the true weight of adulthood, until we face our own battles, that we start looking back and understanding what once escaped us. Not just about our own lives, but our parents' lives too. And then we realize that they weren't unbreakable figures or adults with all the answers. They were people, like you and me, imperfect, confused, afraid, wounded, who were often just as lost, but who, many of them, still tried to do the best they could with what they had. And many times, that included giving us the best they could offer, even when they were falling to pieces inside. And I wouldn't want to end this video without talking about depression. Sometimes we think depression is obvious, that the person suffering from it will say something, or that we'll see it coming, but the truth is, that's not often the case. Sometimes it hides behind a smile, like Caleb. That's why it's so important to talk about this, not to keep it inside, not to think you have to solve it all on your own, or that asking for help is a sign of weakness. Talking is an act of courage, and also of love. Because if you're not doing well, the most loving thing you can do is to let someone be there with you. Depression is an illness, not a personal failure. It's not that you lack gratitude or willpower. It's a pain that runs deep and can make you feel like there's no way out. But there is, and even if you can't see it right now, someone else can help you find it. You're not alone. You don't have to carry everything yourself. You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to have all the answers. It's okay to ask for help, truly. And if you or someone you know is going through something like this, talk to someone, a friend, a family member, a therapist, or anyone you can. But don't isolate yourself. It's worth staying. Even if today hurts, there are good days you haven't lived yet and versions of yourself that haven't awakened yet. If you're struggling today, hold on. Ask for help. Thanks for staying until the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it. And you and I'll see you in the next one.